Ujamaa, Ujamaa, I want to Ujamaa with you. Ujamaa, 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 and I hope you like Ujamaa too. All right, so that's that's the Ujamaa song. We're reading Nyerere's Ujamaa essay number 5. By the way, I just do that song so that people can tune in. You know, like give you guys some time. Most people don't start right away. I kind of want to start right away, but you know, obviously, you want to give some people time to catch up so that they don't miss too much. But obviously, I know most people are going to watch it on the playback, if they watch it at all. But this is reading Nyerere's Ujamaa essay number 5, The Varied Path to Socialism. This was an address to Cairo University, 1967. I don't think this one's that long. I don't recall. Let's just scroll through, see. Okay, maybe it is. Oh, no, it's not that long. So, yeah. So, we're just going to jump right into it. Ujamaa. So the United Arab Republic and Tanzania are both committed to building socialism. And I would like to use the opportunity of your kind invitation to reflect upon what this means. In particular, I wish to direct my remarks to considering its implication for those of us who are, or who may be in the future, in positions of authority or responsibility. Now remember, that's very key. See, that's what I love about this brother, this Nyerere, right? What I love about him is that he gets it. He understands more than most. Realistically, you're supposed to direct your address, even my podcast, are supposed to be addressed to people who are or who may be in the future in positions of authority or responsibility. A lot of people, understand this, are never going to be in positions of authority or responsibility, and therefore it doesn't really matter. Some people, here's the thing that we kind of convince ourselves of. And I remember I was having this conversation on Twitter where I said, you know, I was telling people who are of the ADOS, no, people who are like anti-ADOS. I was like, look, you guys don't have to fight these guys all the time. And then somebody responded, a very smart sister, replied that, hey, these people, you know, when they're talking about their Native Americans and shit, they're going to be parents someday. Or they might be parents and they're teaching their kids this stuff. And it's like, okay, you know, like that's probably like the highest position of authority or responsibilities people have. But of course, you know, the state counters that anyway. Realistically, I would say, you know, I kind of want to pivot towards, well, what do we do with the people in positions of authority or responsibility? Like, how do we want them to think? And so a lot of appreciation to Nyerere for once again articulating very clearly what it is that we need to do. Let me just double check. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. All right. And I'm just going to check out the sound real quick. Well, what do we do? Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. Over time, there has been many definitions of socialism, and many books have been written which purport to explain its requirements and implications. Actually, I do want my son to sit next to me. Here, come here. Sit down next to me. All right. Over time, there has been many definitions of socialism, and many books have been written which purport to explain its requirements and implications. Some of these have been valuable analysis of the problems in general or of problems existing in particular places. We can learn from these writings. Unfortunately, however, there has grown up what I can only call a theology of socialism. People argue, sometimes quite violently, about what is the true doctrine or what this or that writer meant when he used a particular phrase. This would not matter if it were simply a recreation of intellectuals, but in fact we have the peculiar position where leaders grappling with existing problems are denounced or approved on the grounds that they are or are not acting in accordance with the book or one's person's interpretation of the book. So, you know, I mean, technically you could almost argue that that's what I'm doing too, but, but, you know, I'm a fan. And that's why I have my son here to look, you know, it's like the theology of socialism. He's like, hey, some of us are looking at socialism from a doctrinaire standpoint, i.e., you know, oh, look, this is what Marx wrote, blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is partly why I would not even use the word socialism, because socialism is a documented belief system. It is a documented sci-fi novel. If you guys heard me on Shoot the Breeze on Saturday, I pointed out, later in the stream, how it's really realistically just it's just a science fiction novel, because if you guys remember from that last week, Nyerere was talking about, or not last week, I guess it was Saturday, but yeah, I guess it was last week. All right, so last week Nyerere was talking about how essentially everybody must work, and it's like if you really study the communist theology, in a sense, what you find is that the idea is that no one has to work. Okay, no one has to work. So it's just a completely it's a different economic system altogether. And so I've been doing a little bit of exploration on the Discord, so you guys can check out the Discord, where I'm showing different manufacturing positions, and I'm realizing that there's this division of labor that causes this wage differential, right? Whereas if you're really peeping what Nyerere is talking about, he's really talking about simplifying, like reducing the division of labor in a sense. You know what I mean? So that the student is not the student. The student's also the farmer, and the teacher is not the teacher. The teacher's also a farmer. You know what I mean? Like everybody's just a farmer, low key. Which is interesting, but it's not necessarily socialism per se. But of course, he already countered that by saying, look, we have real problems and we're trying to grapple problems, and we shouldn't be denounced or approved on the grounds of whether or not we fit Marxism per se, but of course, like, why use the term then? I mean, he does use Ujamaa, but again, why use the term? So let's go. No man is infallible. And this is something that I would want my son to understand. No man is infallible. Frankly, this seems to be absurd. I am a Christian. And it is part of my belief that the word of God is expressed in the Bible. To me, therefore, in spite of, or even because of the contradictions of the Bible, it is quite sensible to try to get its full meaning. And when I am trying to act in accordance with God's wishes, to prefer to those who have given the Bible a detailed study, right? I believe that is the same thing is true of those who accept the Quran as the inspired word of the God's prophet, Muhammad. But the books on socialism are different. They are written by men. So that's what I'm saying. Like, what? Like, these Bibles and these are written by men too. Like, what? Yeah, you're losing me. You're losing me. But that's what I'm saying. He started off. No man is infallible. He started it off. Right? I'm telling my son to be quiet. Sometimes you just got to sit down and listen. Anyway, so look, I believe that it's the same is true of those who accept the Quran as the inspired word of God's prophet Muhammad. But the books on socialism are different. They are written by men, wise and clever men perhaps, but still men. Consequently, we should use their books as we use the work of living people, knowing that one individual may contribute greatly to the solution of a problem, but that no man is infallible. Indeed, I think that this idea that there is one pure socialism for which the recipe is already known is an insult to human intelligence. It seems to me that man is yet to solve the problem of living in society, and that each of us may have something to contribute to the problems it involves. We should recognize that there are books on socialism which can illuminate the problems and books which chart a way forward from a particular point, but that is all. So he's not really like a book guy, and I like, neither am I, honestly. Just throwing that out there. It is imperative that socialists continue thinking, and you can tell I'm not a book guy because I'm reading these books and I'm complaining. You know what I mean? Like, a book guy is probably just, oh my gosh, like you see those other people, like when they I think I talked about it on the other Shoot the Breeze. Where somebody was like, Francis Crest. No, I think I talked about it yesterday. I was reviewing some. So I have a regular program called Enemies Within, and I was reviewing. By the way, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Oni, but I was reviewing some video, and then somebody was like, I remember somebody saying Francis Crest Welsing was flawless, and blah blah blah. Like, those are people, like, fanatics. Like the people who were like, oh man, gosh, you gotta read Wretched of the Earth. You gotta read it. It's so perfect, Like, I don't do that. I read Wretched of the Earth critically. I read everything critically. In fact, I got a video of me reading Wretched of the Earth. Like, I'm live on video reading that book. Another book I have on video is I think Blood in My Eyes. Like, another one that I was just critical of. Like, I'm with Nyerere in this sense of that, books are written by men and men are flawed. Or not infallible. The men are fallible. like even I could like look at my old literature and like find something to critique, you know. I don't find critiques that important. I'm just saying that I think that everybody at some point, so on and so forth. I was explaining to somebody, in fact, I'll tell you guys this. I was explaining to somebody, because somebody said, "Well, you wrote books," and I'm like, "Yeah, books are intellectual snapshots. They're snapshots of your intellectual development, and that's partly why I would write another book. But you continue developing even after you wrote the book. So when I wrote the Pro-Black Companion, or for instance, somebody would call me out and say, when I wrote Zubiri, I was like, I was thinking of a Pan-African world where like this African nation would make a little Africa in America or something, right? Which is still a possibility, like how China does Chinatown and so forth. But like, nowadays I'm not really too pressed on a little Africa in a sense, Granted, it's still a possibility because, like I said, China makes Chinatown. Italy makes Little Italy, and all over the world too. China makes Chinatown in Ghana and stuff. But yeah, like I in that sense and in that regard, I'm just saying that you always change. It's a snapshot of where you are when you write. So this is just a snapshot of Nyerere when he was, 1967 at Cairo. It's not necessarily him, but it's a good snapshot. Anyway, we'll chart away, but that is all. So it is imperative that socialists continue thinking, and this thinking must be more than an attempt to discover what's any so-called socialist Bible or socialist Quran really says and means. It is necessary that those who call themselves scientific socialists should be scientific. In that case, they would accept or reject socialist ideas and methods in accordance with the objective circumstances of time and place. They would certainly not be hampered or inhibited by the irrelevancies of a socialist theology. Let me hasten to add that, in conformity with this approach to socialism, I consider that my remarks here today are simply a contribution to the continuing discussion, no more, right? Yet I am not saying that, in my view, socialism is a vague concept which can have as many different meanings and variations as there are people who advocate it. A useful definition of the basic assumptions and purposes of socialism is not only possible, it is also essential. And actually, that's the basis that, even I would judge socialism, is that, what is the basic assumption and purposes? And that's where I think that it's itself infallible. It's itself fallible, right? And from that basis, a certain practical principles do inevitably follow, but principles become effective only when they are applied to situations. To say that human life is sacred is to state a principle, but that principle only becomes meaningful when it is applied to saving someone from danger or refraining from such actions that might jeopardize someone else's well-being. This principle is essential to social living, but it does not give an answer to every life situation. For example, what should be done when a psychotic murderer's life threatens the safety of other people? Exactly. So that's another thing. Like, we say we're, human life is sacred, but we don't really believe that. You understand? It's just a principle we use for social living. But it's like, if a guy is, hanging around in a daycare with ill intentions, everybody's perfectly fine with like gutting him. You know what I mean? That's it. Like, that's it. It doesn't matter that he's a human being, his life is forfeit at that moment, and we understand that, so it's not like you don't want to get hooked up on principles, and even like when it comes to the protection of children, you say the protection of children. What about the child that's like a rampant bully? Like if a child is choking another child, like I'll say that, like I saw these kids fighting. Nah, I didn't care because I didn't care. But like if the kid just started strangling the other kid, then yeah, I would probably I don't know if I would intervene per se because they were not Africans, but there's a possibility that I would, like if it were the case that the fight was going too far, I don't know if I'd be like saving other people, but you guys get what I'm saying. Brother Bakari, why Brother Bakari got to show up when I'm talking about possibly saving some other ethnic group? I don't know, man. You see somebody just strangling somebody on the streets, you're just like, I don't know. I mean, there's a possibility I'd intervene. I don't know. I mean, part of me is like, I don't really care. Like I said, I saw this car crash, and I was just like, probably white folk, and I just walked away. But like at the same time, it's like, like it depends. Like if you see something really serious, like do you do you just sit back? But that's what I'm saying. It's like about social living and how much you value your social living. Now, obviously, in an African situation, I would definitely intervene in a quarrel that might take it too far if it's safe for me to do so. All right, hold on a second. All right. So the basic purpose of socialism, for socialism, the basic purpose is the well-being of the people, and the basic assumption is an acceptance of human equality. For socialism, there must be a belief that every individual, man and woman, whatever color, shape, race, creed, religion, or sex, is an equal member of society with equal rights in the society and equal duties to it. So you see that. Well, like that's why I would say this is just the basic purpose. Like why I could never. You can't be a reasonable person and say there's the belief that every individual, man or woman, whatever color, religion, creed, race, right, is an equal member of society with equal rights in the society and equal duties to it. That's already going to be a problem for you. Like actually, honestly, it's like even if you didn't do this specificity, like to have every individual with equal rights in the society and equal duties, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? So, honestly, so one of the things that my belief. So, like you say, well, you don't like these guys. What is your belief? My belief is that I actually recognize that humans might be hierarchical. Just like the lions are hierarchical. You know, humans can be that too. And I think that there is an advantage to being hierarchical. Okay, there's an advantage to being hierarchical, and there's an advantage to centralizing your information and centralizing your decision making. And in that sense, you're going to have unequal rights. Like there's an advantage to unequal rights and unequal duties in the sense that, let's say, for instance, all right. One of the things I wanted to do when I was younger was write a math textbook, right? And the reason being is because not only am I effective at communication, but I'm also pretty good at math and explaining mathematical concepts. Like my son, he's very young, but this guy can do his multiplications and stuff like that, right? That said, I could accept that I have a duty to writing this math textbook, and I could accept if somebody else doesn't. You get what I'm saying? I could accept if I have the right to write the textbook, and I could accept if somebody else doesn't. I mean, obviously, this might be a really literal description of what he's saying, but what I mean is that there's this, like I said, one of the main concepts behind the economy that we have today in the West, I guess, or the Western economy, is the division of labor, and I believe that the division of labor precedes the Western economy, but I think that to a high degree, we tend to minimize the importance of division of labor based off of what we see as the village life, where the village life you might not have as sharp a degree of division of labor, in the sense that you might have a bunch of farmers and you might have some drummers, like you might have some traditional drum makers, some traditional griots, but you have a lot of farmers, like predominantly, right? And that's not a concept that like lends to that's not lends to, like, it's already in unequal rights, unequal duties, but we tend to like bypass the reality that actually there were lots of people who weren't necessarily farmers, like they weren't necessarily strictly farmers, but we, like, for some reason we just kind of skip over that, and it's a little weird, but we just skip over it. But anyway, let's go to Brother Bakari. Brother Bakari says it's okay to care about other people. Well, I don't know about that. I have these elderly. Nah, don't. You gotta delete this, man. I'm joking. He says I have these elderly white neighbors, and his wife used to fall down a lot. I used to go help her all the time. Dang, man. Come on, man. They say don't get to know your heroes, man. I'm joking. Like, look, it's tough. I mean, it would totally depend. Like I'm not going to be seen walking away from something like right in front of me, per se. Like it would be like really tough. Like for instance, I one time saw this. I think it might have been a white lady. It could have been a black lady. I don't know. But somebody was like, "Hey, I'm lost and I need to find the way to the hospital. And I'm just like, okay, sure. I mean, like it's hard for it's like I'm not really at that stage where I'm just like fuck you and just walk away. And I'm like, fuck you, you fucking, like I'm not at that stage because it's kind of like, you never know when you're gonna just randomly need somebody else, and then like this social memory, it's like that's the dick who left that old lady to die. That's not also why I do it. I mean, it's also just like, sometimes like if somebody is like just directly asks you, you're just like, okay, fine, like actually I think that's what happened to me actually at the playground or something. I was at a playground and some little Arab kid walked up and like he wanted to play with this soccer ball that nobody was using, or football, I guess, I don't know. He wanted to play with this football that I wasn't using, that I brought, and his relative asked, hey, can he play with that? And I was like yeah, like I wasn't gonna be like, no, you fucking, like he was like 3 or something, no, you stupid freaking Arab. Like I'm not, like it's just like whatever. I mean, I don't like them. I don't want to personally give them, and that's why you go back to what Nyerere was talking about. I wouldn't personally give them responsibility and authority over my life, but if they want to play with it, like a little kid wants to play with a football, I'm not like and I'm not using it, like, you know what I mean? I don't really care. All right, so anyway, a person who does not accept this may accept many policies pursued by socialists, but he cannot be a socialist. Nor can any social organization which is based on inequality justify the support of socialists, whatever its political or economic practices. So there you go. Like you said, I can't be a socialist. I just can't, like, because I'm just like, yeah, I don't mind division of labor. I don't mind inequality. You know what I mean? I don't mind if black people are the prime beneficiaries. Like, I don't mind that. Just like I don't even complain if white people would see themselves as the prime beneficiaries. I mean, obviously when I'm left out, I wouldn't mind if I got something, but I also understand. Like I understand if a white family is eating dinner, I'm not gonna get a plate. You know what I mean? If I do get a plate, I'm like, shit. If I'm hungry, like, yeah, that's cool. I mean, I don't know if I like white people's food that much, but sure, but if I don't get a plate, like, I'm not really complaining. Just like I don't think anybody's really complaining if I don't give them a plate of food. The so-called National Socialists, or the Nazi Germany, were not more socialist than the racialist government of South Africa is socialist. Any particular policies of government control of the economy notwithstanding, in socialism there's no room for racialism and no room either for doctrines of aristocracy. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the problem. Neither is there any room for that kind of arrogance which leads educated men and women to despise the uneducated. The human equality before God, which is the basis of all the great religions of the world, is also the basis of the political philosophy of socialism. You see what I'm saying? Like, this is one of the issues, not only with the religions of the world, but also socialism. Yet socialism is not utopian, nor is it unaware that men are unequal in their capacities. On the contrary, is based on the facts of human nature. It is a doctrine which accepts mankind as it is and demands such an organization of society that man's inequalities are put to the service of his equality. So this is actually pretty interesting. He acknowledges our inequalities, but says that, there's going to be a service of our equality. So let's see what that's about. Socialism is in fact the application of the principle of human equality to the social, economic, and political organization of society. It is the recognition that some human beings are physically strong and others weak, that some are intellectually able while others are rather dull, that some people are skillful in the use of their hands while others are clumsy. It involves too a recognition that every person has both a selfish and a social instinct, which are often in conflict. Socialist doctrine that demands the deliberate organization of society in such a manner that it is impossible, or at least very difficult, for individual desires to be pursued at the cost of other people. Wait a second. Socialist doctrine that demands the deliberate organization of society in such a manner that it is impossible, or at least very difficult, for individual desires to be pursued at the cost of other people, or for individual strength to be used for the exploitation of others. Okay, so, and again, like, I think that white people really introduced that exploitation into us. I think more of us want reciprocity. But I think also one of the issues with Nyerere's version of socialism is that he kind of loosely defines exploitation. So that if I tell my son, or like if I cook food for my son, like I'm being exploited. You know what I mean? And obviously he doesn't do that kind of example, but just imagine it this way. If somebody else is cooking for me, then they're exploiting me. Or if, for instance, then I'm exploiting them. Or let's say this is a more realistic example. If I buy a building and I get a kitchen and I get a lady who wants to cook and I say, hey, cook these meals, you sell the meals, and I'll pay you a certain hourly wage, notwithstanding how many people are in the restaurant. And then, you know, people come into the restaurant, like people don't come to the restaurant, and I'm still paying her. Whereas if if a lot of people come into the restaurant, I'm still paying her, but I'm paying her the same rate that I was paying her when the restaurant was dull versus when the restaurant was popping, right? And then apparently I would be exploiting her. You get what I'm saying? Now the reason, now the thing that doesn't make sense is that if I'm paying her when the business is doing bad, or why if I'm not paying her less when the business is doing bad, why am I paying her more when the business is doing good? You know, that's the big question. Now, if she happens to, now here's the thing, if the business is doing bad, then would I pay her nothing? You understand? And that's the question. Because if I'm not paying her nothing, because here's the thing too, one of the things that we have to realize about this quote unquote capitalism, or the way how the economy works, is that when I buy that restaurant, right, and I buy that kitchen and I buy the ingredients, I'm down. You understand? I'm down. So it's going to cost me, let's just give a number. It's going to cost me $20,000 or something like that, right? If the business is popping, or if the business doesn't sell anything, I'm still down $20,000, right? But she's getting paid. The little girl, the cook, the chef is getting paid. If the business pulls in $1,000, right? So let's say the chef is paid $1,000. I'm sorry, it's paid $100 a day, right? If it costs me $20,000 to start the restaurant, whatever, right, and get the ingredients for the day, which is, you know, like $1,000 or whatever, right? Or let's say it's $500, whatever, right? She cooks and nobody comes, right? She gets paid the $100, right? And I make nothing, right? If she cooks and it's like she pulls in $1,000 of, you know, profit, or she pulls in $1,000, right? She still gets paid $100, and I take home $900, right? Now you might be like, wow, you're exploiting her. But understand this. If I make $900 from her cooking, right? I put that $900 toward the fact that I lost $20,000 in starting the business. You see what I'm saying? So essentially the only person who actually makes money from this arrangement is the chef. Now, eventually, if I manage the business well, it might pull in, you know, $50,000 down the line, and she would still be making $100 a day. And then you might say something like, oh, well, so on and so forth. But a lot of that, the reasoning behind whether the business pulls in the money is going to be my intellectual contribution, my business management, my intellectual acumen. You know, and you could say, well, it's actually the chef, and it's actually the waiter, and actually the waitress, and so on and so forth. You can say that. But then, you know, try to manage a restaurant, or tell me if every restaurant does pull a profit. You get what I'm saying? And tell me if it's not skillful in and of itself to hire people, to hire the chef and to hire the waiter and to gauge their personality and do all this other stuff. It's a thing, you know, it's a thing. Now, obviously, you know, I don't mind if that individual shares in the like has a percentage of the profit per se on top of their wages. I don't mind that. I don't have any complaint about that. I don't have any complaint if they demand a raise based off of what have you. And obviously I don't have a complaint if they just go to another business that would pay them more. But I mean, that's realistically, like, me working people in my own restaurant is not exploitation. You know what I mean? And that's why I appreciate Harsh Reality Podcast. So make sure you guys check him out. I don't know if it's today or next week, but make sure you check him out. Because he was saying, like, look, when he goes to apply for a job, you know, he doesn't take the job if he doesn't like the wages. You know, and that's the thing. It's like, if you don't like the wages, if you don't like the agreement beforehand, then don't take it. You know, and of course you could say that, you know, there's social pressures that say that you have to take it, and kind of, but not really. You know, and I mean, if that's the case, sure, but then just use that time, bide your time, and then try for a better position, or use whatever profit you are getting and then save it up to get your own business. You know, that's really how it goes. But I wouldn't say that somebody's exploiting you if they're hiring you, if you literally signed a contract with them in order to do the position that you were hired to do. You know what I mean? Not to say that there isn't some circumstances where obviously, like what they call it. Well, there are some like contract labor, obviously, like prison labor, obviously. But we all know that's slavery. And then there's the other one, something I can't remember what it's called, but there's something where like you basically like legit. There are some policies that are just like we're making you a slave. You know what I mean? But this like just regular work is not it. So I wouldn't conflate the two. There's some that is and there's some that isn't. Jose's here. He says, "What's up? What's up?" Just Yoda, brother Bakari. I hope you guys appreciated that little explanation. But anyway, for a socialist state, there's requirements have both a negative and positive aspect. Men must be prevented from exploiting each other. And at the same time, institutions and organizations must be such that man's needs and progresses can be cooperatively secured. So socialism is against exploitation and injustice. There are two paths through which exploitation has been historically secured, and which must therefore be blocked. The first was the use of naked force. Originally through physical strength and then through a monopoly of weapons of force, men imposed their will upon others. Armies were the instruments by which a minority kept an exploited majority under submission. The kind of revolution which took place in Egypt, where an army converted itself from being an instrument of oppression into being an instrument of the people and opposing oppression, is rare indeed. More usually, it is the gradual growth of law and the principle of equality before the law, which ease the severity of oppression until the people are in a position to take control of their own destiny. But equality in law, even the theory of equality and the making of law, is not sufficient by itself, for the fact is that equality is indivisible. In practice, it is not possible to be equal in some respects, but not in others. Thus it is that in aristocratic societies, a noble and a commoner are not equal before the law. It will be very unusual for the latter to defeat the former when they go to law for justice, and rare too for each to receive equal treatment for comparable offenses against society. Similarly, a rich man and a poor man are not equally treated for offenses, nor equally likely to receive justice from the society in case of dispute. So what's interesting about this is that we see this in America, and we also see this like racially in America, where black and white do not receive the same punishment before the law. But like I said, like I understand that, obviously I don't like it. I don't want to be on the side of the law where it's like I do something minor and I get a huge slap on the wrist. But I also recognize, at least for me, because like again, my family is not from America. At least for me, I know that like I'm a foreigner in this land. You know what I mean? Like, sure, I have the American citizenship, but I'm a foreigner. I get that African Americans do not view themselves as foreigners, and like I understand that. It's just like, and like I get that. You know what I mean? Like I get that. But I know that this state is very hostile to African Americans, notwithstanding. You know what I mean? So like I get it. But I get it. It's an unfortunate situation, in the sense that I think that African Americans are dealing with statelessness, just not having a state of their own. And it's probably like I could just imagine how frustrating it will be, granted, like I'm like in America and I'm just like, yeah, I don't have a state here. I don't really identify with Jamaica in the sense of having a state in Jamaica, but I could see how if I were in Jamaica, I would recognize, like I would identify Jamaica as my state. You know what I mean? So like it's just like it's kind of like it's really like the more it's like kind of like ignorance is bliss, where it's like the more you understand about the situation in America, the sadder it seems. Not that anybody's like wants pity or cares about pity. It's just that like that's like it's just really sad. To like just not have a nation. And then so you're gonna have this treatment, this noble versus commoner, like be treated like a commoner, be treated like a poor person, and like throughout your entire existence here. And it's like it's low-key sad, and I can see why there are the quote-unquote integrationists and the quote-unquote liberals who want to like dull that. But like, how do you dull something that's just so normal in the world, that's so intrinsic in the world, and it's something that they apply among their own selves. When Nyerere is talking about this, he's not talking about America. He's talking about like England. He's talking about France. He's talking about he's talking about just regular, like he's talking about Tanzania. He's talking about anywhere, and for and it's just so common. But again, like if white people are doing this to themselves, they're like, hey, you know what? I'm a Wall Street banker and you're a McDonald's employee. You know what I mean? Like I own McDonald's and you are an employee. You flip burgers. You're a piece of shit. You know what I mean? But to get that like throughout your life, just based off of the treatment of like just based off of your race, it just seems like it's like I would be like I could understand the frustration. I wouldn't turn the frustration to other immigrant groups, but I could feel that frustration. Anyway, so the rule of law and equality before the law are one essential means of preventing exploitation, but they are only practical when the society as a whole is based on the principle of equality. When, in other words, a socialist policy is being followed, human beings being fallible, socialism does not guarantee justice. It has to be worked for and maintained even in a socialist society. But it is certain that it cannot be truly achieved except in that context. So he's like, look, you can have these laws and all that stuff, but like that's the thing. It's like he's like, you're not gonna get equality before the law ever, unless you're in a socialist society, the society that sees human beings as equal. But like this society is never gonna see human beings as equal, because like why would they? You know, why would they see Jeff Bezos is equal to I don't know, Beyonce, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I was gonna name a white person, but I don't know random white people. Joe Schmo, all right. You know, what's he gonna look at Jeff Bezos is equal to Joe Schmo? You know what I mean? A Joe Schmo, the tractor driver. Like who really cares about Joe Schmo, the tractor? Like tractors are important, or trucks are important, but you know, actually no, I should say that Brother Bakari's a truck driver. But you know what I'm saying? Like white people are gonna value Jeff Bezos for some reason, you know. But anyway, you guys get what I'm saying. The second major means of exploitation has been through private property. For when one man controls the means by which another earns or obtains the food, there you go, clothing and shelter, which are essential to life, then there is no equality. So there you have it. Like that's what it is. That's why people like Jeff Bezos. For when one man controls the means by which another earns or obtains the food, clothing and shelter, which are essential to life, then there is no equality. One man must call another master, for he is the master of life as truly as if he had the power to kill with a gun. The man whose means of living are controlled by another must serve the interests of this other, regardless of his own desires or his needs. The nations which experience feudalism and serfdom know this by experience, but it is true in capitalist societies where the industries which men depend upon for their wages can be closed, contracted, or expanded, and the workers have no voice in decision and no alternative way of obtaining their food, right? So he's like private property. So private property, basically when you start to own the food, clothing, shelter, you know, and like, but again, that's like one of the costs of living in a sense, you know. How do you make it so that nobody controls any aspect to the cost of living? So if a society is to be made up of equal citizens, then each man must control his own means of production. The farmer must own his own tools, his hoe or his plow. And that's what I'm saying. What about when the tools need to be more advanced? The carpenter must have his own saw and not be dependent on the whims of another for its use, and so on. The tools of production must be under the control of the individual or group which depends upon them for life. So, you know, one of the issues with this is that it's really good on the small scale. If you're just talking about a hoe and a plow. But what about this? Every farmer owns their own tractor, right? Or I have this video on the Discord, right, where there's this carrot picking machine. Okay, so there's this machine that can dig into the earth and pull out carrots by the thousands or by the hundreds, right? In seconds. Right? Or in minutes or whatever, right? No, seconds, right? Pulling out carrots from the ground like just giant machine. Should every farmer have that? Okay? And how does this farmer, and like what does this farmer need to do in order to acquire one of those tools? You know what I mean? So in the socialist economy, would every farmer have this gigantic carrot picking machine? Or would no farmer have this giant carrot picking machine? You know what I'm saying? So it really comes down to, well, when you're talking about producing things that are really costly for a society, because to make this tracker thing, not only do you need somebody to design it, like an engineer or what have you, right? But then you need to put a whole bunch of resources in building it, like you need to put metals, plastics, circuitry, all that kind of stuff. You need to put so much that realistically it would be very costly for an individual to have. But if every farmer owns his own tools, does he own this expensive vehicle? And does he then have a slew of expensive vehicles? Like, on what basis does he have these expensive vehicles? It's like right now I have this home gym, right? I have a punching bag. The punching bag costs $300, and it's a waste. I shouldn't have gotten it, right? But what if I, at some point, wanted to get 10 punching bags, right? Like, if I wanted to spend $3,000 on 10 punching bags, then I could do that. But if the socialist economy says, hey, you know what, you can just get whatever the fuck you want for whatever cost, like at no cost to you, then what's to stop me from getting those 10 punching bags? You know what I mean? What's the limit? How do you control my consumption? And actually, I'll say this. So my father isn't, like, my father's pretty well to do, and by well to do, I mean, like, he has money, I don't see the money. Like, he doesn't give me any of the money, but he has money, right? This guy bought a drone. He told me he bought a drone, and I was like, oh, cool, a drone. I'm looking online for drones, and it's like, oh, $60 drone. I'm like, okay, makes sense. He's like, it was like a $1,200 drone. He doesn't even fly it. You understand? But, like, if he wants to consume it, and I don't know if I'm not going to say he's well-to-do. I'm going to say maybe he's probably middle class. I don't know. Like, I don't really know. I think he's actually retired, honestly. But still, the point is that he had the money to just waste on a freaking $1,200 drone, which I think is stupid. But, especially since, he one time did ask me for some money. So it's just kind of dumb. But like, if you want something, what's to stop you from getting it in a socialist society? Like, because I wouldn't mind a drone. I honestly wouldn't mind a $1,200 drone. And if society were building $1,200 drones for some reason, but they were free to me, then yeah, I'd probably get one. But, like, right now in this quote unquote capitalist economy, ain't no damn way. I mean, like, I guess if I had $1,200 and I really wanted a drone, maybe. But I'm gonna say that I don't have $1,200. It's just that it's just a waste. My point is that how do you determine who gets what in a society if you don't have that? And then it becomes also, why would their society even make drones? Why would they even make drones if they're just a resource sink that doesn't profit anybody? You know what I'm saying? And that's realistically the problem. You're going to, like, when you the socialist scheme is kind of like, hey, you're going to stay in the Stone Age. You're going to use a hoe and a plow. You're a carpenter. You're just going to have a saw. You're not gonna do drone. Like, you're not gonna make drones. Why are you making drones? You get what I'm saying? Life is just about basic, simple living, and that's like, I'm trying to tell you, that's one of the issues with Nyerere's socialism, is that it just seems like you want us to be into the basic, simple living, and anything beyond that just doesn't. It's just not compatible. I hope you guys can see that. So in African traditional life, there was this normal routine. Now, this was a normal routine. So that's what I'm saying. In traditional life, this was a normal routine. And that's fine. Like, I have nothing against traditional life, minus the fact that, realistically, we were conquered in our traditional life. You know what I mean? Like, we were conquered. Nyerere is the first president after colonization, which tells you that they were colonized. You get what I'm saying? So it's like, why would I want to go into the system that I was colonized under? And like me, like, as much as, like, just as a African diaspora, just as a person who descends from Caribbean people, right? Or from Caribbeanized people. Like, my ancestors were stolen from this land of Africa. They were stolen from this land in Africa, living the traditional life. So part of me is like, yeah, I wouldn't mind going back to a traditional life, but I completely understand that there's also social ramifications involved in being a traditional, like the traditional life. That yes, if the carpenters only use saws, they're probably not going to build anything worthwhile to defend themselves. You know, if I want to set up, it's like the Three Little Pigs story. You know, I don't remember how the story goes, but I think one of the pigs like make a house of straw, another makes a house of wood, another makes a house of brick, and the idea is that this wolf can come along and blow down even the house of wood. So the house that's made by the carpenter with the saw can be blown down by anybody who's willing to eat you. Whereas the house that's made from the brick, right, isn't. But how do you make bricks? Now, some people can make bricks from plastic. Some people can make bricks from cement or what have you. But that requires heavy machinery. I mean, you could do it by hand. I'm not going to say it doesn't require, but you know, you guys get what I'm saying. You know, it requires a more deliberate system. I mean, obviously, some people could think of pyramids and so forth and say, well, where was that? You know, but again, it's like it's a complicated question. So hopefully you guys appreciate that. I'm sorry. Let's see what the comments are like. 'Cause I remember Jay actually doesn't mind socialism, right? So the emphasis should be, or I think so, right? The emphasis should be on the social. If one farmer has such a machine, the other could have the huge plow, and the next, the grain harvester, sharecropping on another frequency. Yeah, so sharecropping is actually, ironically, sharecropping is the word I was looking for in regards to like what's a real exploitative system. But yeah, I mean, technically, you wouldn't mind if the community owned these vehicles. But again, like that ownership, like there's still going to be that sort of ownership, and then you're still going to have to come along with this idea of like private property doesn't stop there. You know what I mean? But you would like you could on a communal level, but the issue with these economies, like that's the issue with these economies, is that you realistically, what happens is that when these machines replace, like these machines actually replace human labor to the point where you no longer need as much human labor. So that thing that like, so like, all right, so if you're trying to pick 100 carrots, or like you're trying to pick 1,000 carrots, that might take or the way how carrots are like, I don't know if anybody else knows, but carrots are apparently, they're like deep in the earth. You know what I mean? So you would have to dig them up. And that would require a lot of time and effort. Whereas this machine just kind of rips through the earth. So what would take maybe, let's say 3 days to pick, this machine can do in an hour. That said, you wouldn't need 3 days of people. Like, you know, 3 days and 20 people, this machine can do with one person in an hour, right? So you wouldn't actually need the other 19 people. And then, therefore, what will these other 19 people be doing? You get what I'm saying? So like the thing with modern industry or modern technology is that you actually won't need that many people in the agricultural sphere, and that's actually what happens throughout. Like even when, even in these societies that Nyerere is like esteeming, realistically, like for instance, like use the Yoruba as an example, like. After you create this food surplus, and after you have a lot of food, what happens is that when you're overproducing food, you can then, like, you're going to start going into other fields. You know, you don't actually have the people just sitting around getting the overproduction of food, because that's a waste, you know? Jose says, $100 drones are toys. My second-hand one costs $450. So you another one of those people, man. y'all just be buying these motherfucking like expensive ass things for no reason. Like, what do you need a drone for? You know? All right. Jose says, I'm not following you. Social revolutions went together with industrialization, and it was us farmers that grabbed the AK and fought the colonizers in Guinea-Bissau. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the social revolution does go to industrialization. Nyerere is kind of going with like a Maoist, like an extreme Maoist version. So like obviously the USSR was industrialization. Mao was also industrialization. But Nyerere seems to be like when he says the farmer should just go for the hoe and so forth. That's like he's like his variation is different than like Mao or seemingly it's different. Like what he seems to be advocating for, like advocating against industrialization to a large extent, you know. So yeah, you getting that secondhand drone for $450 is like I don't know if that's a thing in Nyerere's economy. So he says, in African traditional life, this was the normal routine. In only a few small areas of Tanzania, for example, was there anything approaching a feudal system. Over the greater part of the country, every family worked the land it had cleared and with its own tools and for its own benefit. But there can be no going back to this system, which has now suffered considerably from the effects of a money economy. It was effective only at a primitive level of life and left people prey to the vagaries of the weather and subject to other national calamities. Exactly, right? So group or communal ownership. So I think this is going to be what Jay is talking about. To secure a good life, it is necessary to take advantage of at least some of the modern knowledge and modern techniques. Thus, individual ownership of the tools of production is no longer universally possible. Our people want the products of mass production, and the easier life with this technology makes possible. Even in agriculture, we can no longer rest content with the situation where each farmer owns his own djembe and panga. So I don't think it's a djembe. I think that's some instrument, and uses them as his own only tools. By such methods, the farmer sweats for very little result. Yet as soon as the more efficient and complicated tools are used, individual ownership becomes either impossible or a great waste of resources. There you go. So I guess I could have just read ahead. So for example, even if it were possible to provide each family in our wheat producing areas with a combine harvester, it would be absurd to do so. So that's what I'm saying. There you go. There you have it. If the scale of operation were such that this machine could be economically used, then one family could not by themselves undertake all the other operations which would be involved. The family would have to employ labor to do these other things. And so we would again be in a situation of exploitation where one man's livelihood depends upon the decisions of another. See, that's what I was talking about. You're no longer, now once upon a time you had 20 people doing the work. Now you only have one person doing the work. And so now the other 19 people are living off that one person. Now, here's the thing. That's not necessarily exploitation, but he's going to say that it's exploitation. And that's what I'm saying. It's one of those literal, it's like one of those, it's like an abuse of the word. You know what I mean? And that's where the problem comes inside. And so again, like realistically in normal societies, if only one person was needed back, then and there was 20 people, then maybe 18 would leave. You know what I mean? And that's why towns were developed and cities were developed, or there would be a difference in the economy. But what Nyerere is saying is, oh nope, those 20 people, well then obviously there's exploitation, and it's like, no, it's not exploitation, but we're going to keep going. In those areas of production where individual ownership of tools is impractical, we are therefore forced to the conclusion that group ownership of the means of production is the only way in which the exploitation of man by man can be prevented. This communal ownership can be through the state, which represents every citizen, or through some other institution which is controlled by those involved, such as, for example, a cooperative or a local authority. So again, you still have a limited supply of the goods, of the corn. I kind of want to show this carrot harvester. I kind of want to just show you guys this carrot harvester so we can like get on the same page as to what the carrot harvester looks like. Part of me doesn't want to show videos because of how I got in trouble last time, but like part of me just wants to show you guys just so that we can so that we can all have the understanding of because there's this one channel on Twitter that is like really helpful in terms of what it is that what really is required, how this everything is just complicated by let me see if I can find it. I believe it was in this channel, but it looks like it might not even be. Yeah, okay, I'm looking at this channel and it doesn't seem to be here, but there's one that is mass producing bread. It's really I'll show you guys. Let's see, I'll switch the screen. Here, you got this. So this right here, it's not going to be the carrot one, but this right here is an example of how bread is manufactured, right? And this is really important. Basically, there's this dough machine. The dough is rolled and the bread is produced, and then the bread is put into the situation, and then it's glazed by the machine, powdered or whatever, then baked, and then sent out, and there's like thousands of bread, so on and so forth. So we used to live in societies where this was a handmade process, which is easy. You know, you get the dough, roll the dough, so on and so forth. Now you're going to have this big ass machine that does all of this, right? And so now the question becomes, you have a handful of people. See, that's where Marxism comes into play. Basically, Marxism is, we have this industry, and we're saying to ourselves, does the bourgeoisie need to take the profit? But of course, there's other questions here. Who set up this machine? Who bought these machines? Who is making the recipe or the ingredients or the process, or who's determining how long it's baked and how long, or what the composition of the flour is and all that kind of stuff. And if this machine were owned by a community, who's to say that the same process would be, you know, would it bake the same length, you know, would it so on and so forth. There's so much going on. So this is a channel, How Things Are Manufactured. This is a pineapple slicer. This is another thing that we have to recognize, that when they're making these cookie cutters, what they do is they have these machines that push the metal into shape, and then but like, if you're mass producing these, who gets the profit in this sort of society? Like, we kind of, on a basic level, we do say something along the lines of, you know, share, you know, collective ownership. But what does that even mean? Like, what if, like, who's to say that this is a cookie cutter that we want? And again, who's working here? You saw this guy put his hands here. Not everybody in the community is going to be working here. So the question is, to whom does the profit go? I wish that I could, that's the stackable chips. I wish that I could find the, I'll have to probably look it up. Oh, this was another one that's really important. Mass produce, making chili oil on an industrial scale. So this is somewhere in China, I guess, where they just drop a bunch of butter, they melt it down, they pour oil, they so on and so forth. This is a recipe that they have. And so they use a lot of resources. Now, farmers, they got this from the farmers, obviously. They use a lot of resources, mix it up, and these are the workers in the situation. We talk about community ownership. These are the workers. And then they package these. We're going to go to the, well, I don't want to skip to the end, but they put a bunch of ingredients. So they get all these ingredients all over the world. They have these machines that are running and whirling. And this is probably like a 20-person thing, right? The community probably has 5,000 people, but 20 people are on the side doing this, making some sort of, like, just dumping a bunch of ingredients that they collected, and the ingredients came through some people like Bakari, who were trucking the ingredients somewhere, right? Who were sending the ingredients somewhere, and then they come together and they make some sort of food concoction, right? And look how many ingredients. So again, if you had just random people, like, again, this is a very specific recipe, right? And this recipe can go very wrong if you do not use the same ingredients. So somebody has to be behind the composition of the ingredients. Somebody has to be behind all that kind of stuff. And then it just comes into question, well, how do you, because you could always run this machine and package an ingredient that nobody wants to taste. You know what I mean? And then what happens is that you done used a bunch of resources. Okay, you just done used a bunch of resources that will not suffice. So I wanted to show you guys the carrot one. I'll probably have to look it up a little later. But I wanted to show you guys the carrot one. I'd have to, like, I'm going to open my Discord and we're going to see. But, like, the carrot one is, like, it's a little bit, but the carrot one is a little more basic, a little bit more straightforward, right? How, you know, we all can tell, oh yeah, do the collective ownership with the carrots, right? But then when it comes to the making of the packaging of the sauce to distribute across the planet, right? What is collective ownership there? You understand? If only so many people are involved in the process, what is collective ownership there? Okay, Trigger Happy is here. He says, if it's from a Marxist perspective, they probably will answer you that the state oversees all industry. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. When the state oversees all industries, is it going to be packaging sauce for the planet? You get what I'm saying? And so, like, realistically, yeah. So it's like, is it going to be processing thing for all, the entire planet? Now I do. So, like, the carrot one is actually it's kind of straightforward. I mean, you guys know what it's like. It kind of just looks interesting, honestly. But you guys know how, you already guys knows what that's like. Actually, I think I found the link. So let me just it's really just like, it's like a low key waste of you guys' time. But I'm a little bit interested in the industrial process myself. But you know, when we talk about industrialization, we're talking about this. You know what I mean? We're talking about this. So this is obvious. You know, everybody has, look how they rip out these freaking carrots. You know how long that would take me as a human being? Everybody has access to this machine, or this machine rolls over everybody's land. You know, that's fine. We get this on a basic level. That makes sense. But when it comes to the production of bread, when it comes to the production of sauce, how is that going to be distributed? How is that going to, because again, these machines cost money. So you could say, yeah, the state is going to just build this machine. But what if the state builds the wrong machine? Then what? You understand? If an individual makes the wrong machine, then it's like, oh, sucks to you. It's like when my dad buys this drone, it's like, okay, sucks for you. You bought this drone, and you know that's on you. You know what I mean? If he makes money from, you know, doing drone shows, then like good for him. And if he doesn't make money from doing, oh, I didn't even show you guys the video. Freaking A. All right, this is the carrot machine. If he makes money from the drone thing, if he doesn't make money, who cares? Like, nobody really gives a shit, right? Whereas if the state makes drones, right, your tax money goes towards the production of drones, and they're completely useless, then suddenly, you know, you paid for something that was useless. You get what I'm saying? It's like this carrot thing where it's like, I mean, like the carrot thing works, right? But like, what if there was a vehicle that didn't actually get carrots well? And so it costs the state, you know, thousands of dollars for this vehicle, right? Because this vehicle is probably like, it's probably like a couple of $1,000s, right? You know what? I'm going to say probably like $4,000 or $5,000, right? The state buys like 10 of these, and then you figure out that they catch on fire, you know? Then what? You know what I'm saying? So that's like realistically, you know, like just something that I started peeping that was pretty interesting when we in consideration of Nyerere's version of socialism. So let me go back to the comments. Let me see what the comments are like. No comments. All right. But anyway, thanks fam for joining me today. Brother Bakari, Jose, Trigger Happy. You know, good to see you guys. I know it's not Saturday, so it's good to see you guys off a Saturday. Let's see. In those areas of production where individual ownership of tools is impractical, we are therefore forced to the conclusion that group ownership of the means of production is the only way in which exploitation of man by man can be prevented. This communal ownership can be through the state, which represents every citizen, or through some other institution, which is controlled by those involved, such as example, a cooperative or a local authority. So again, you know, you as a group, you know, get together and you buy the machine, and the machine rolls over everybody's thing, and that's fine. Like that's what we do with garbage trucks. You know what I mean? Garbage trucks are owned by the state, and the state just kind of collects the garbage. You know, like that's like nobody cares. Nobody, like none of us own this thing, and it's a useful thing. But it what happens is when we get a little more complicated, and we start doing with bread, and we start making bread, and we start like mass producing bread, or we start mass producing potato chips. I didn't show you guys that video, but there was mass producing of potato chips. When we start mass producing cookie cutters, you know, because the reality is that you're putting a bunch of metal into a machine and making something that you don't even know if it's going to sell. You don't even know if it's going to bring a profit. So it really, like, you don't even know if anybody even needs it. You know, like, who even needs a cookie cutter? Because I don't. Like I've never, like legit, I'd never used a cookie cutter. But well, I don't know. I think maybe once. I don't know. But anyway, so the same thing that applies to the question of distribution and exchange in small peasant societies. That's what I'm saying. It's really focusing on small peasant societies, but not realizing the scale in which the depth in which economies can be. So, like when you're talking about like manufacturing processors, you know what I mean? You're now saying, yeah, let the government produce the processors. But what if you produce 20,000 processors and then IBM comes with a breakthrough that makes your processors obsolete? You're not moving that product anymore. Or like video game cards. I mean, what do they call them? Graphic cards for computers. Like your graphic card might be shit for the latest game, and then you screwed up and put a whole bunch of coltan and cobalt into the production of a bunch of graphic cards that won't even work for anything, you know, or like a video game device. It's just really complicated when you really get it to the nitty gritty of how much is created. Like, for instance, right now I'm using this microphone, or I'm using a keyboard, or I'm using a computer, or I'm using a television. When you get into that realm, like off of the product, like off of, oh, we're farming it, off of the peasant economy, right? When you get off of the peasant economy and you realize that we have video game controllers, we have this, we have that, we have fans, we have this, like all these are being manufactured by machines. That's when, like you have to like that. That's when the peasant economy no longer scales. And so the communist economy is like, oh, we're just going to have these machines running by themselves. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to minimize the leadership of the machines, but it's just not realistic. Hopefully that's let me see what the comments are like, actually. Let me see if anybody, no. Okay. So, all right. Let's keep going. So the same thing that applies to the question of distribution and exchange. In small peasant societies, it is possible for each grower or each producer to bring his goods to a central place and bargain with those who are interested in acquiring them, right? So there you go. That's a town. But the increasing specialization of production, which is involved in modern methods, requires more sophisticated techniques. And once again, a private individual can then get into a position where he controls the well-being of another. He can do this by his charges for transport, by his commission on sales, or by exploiting a monopoly position, which is economically justified. Exactly. Like in real life, you're going to have people who are, oh yeah, I'll transport your stuff. Like when we saw the bread thing, like the flour does not, like the flour is made somewhere, obviously, but it's not there already. You know what I mean? Like somebody transported it, and so somebody was paid to transport it. You get what I'm saying? So that's the charges for transport. When the bread was, when the flour was purchased from the farmers or whatever, there was a commission on the sale of the person who made the sale. And it's like a lot to it. It's like the society is so complicated that you cannot just limit it to this local peasant thing. Because in the peasant community, when you just digging up the land, sure, nobody's paying to distribute it because it's already there. Like, you know what I mean? Like transportation is just go outside. Like I'll tell you guys, when I was in Jamaica, I went to Jamaica for a funeral. But when I was in Jamaica, my son and I were asked to, asked by like my aunt's husband or something to go get some mangoes. So we walked maybe 5 blocks to his aunt's house, and we just got mangoes from a tree. You know what I mean? And then we had the bucket and we brought it back. Now, obviously, we didn't charge anybody. It was technically free labor, but we got our own mangoes, so it was whatever. But that's the real world. Now, what happens though if you need to retrieve mangoes from 5 miles? You know what I'm saying? That's when it's different. Now, in a normal economy or a normal system, you wouldn't need to go 5 miles for mango. But to get a mango tree, if you live in a mango tree area, but we didn't live in a carrot area. So how do I get carrots? You get what I'm saying? So yeah, all right. So communal ownership of the means of distribution, the railways or the lorries, etc., and communal enterprises in the act of bargaining can eliminate this kind of exploitation. So this is kind of fantasy, but I mean, it's possible. Let's see. At the same time, communal ownership in both production and distribution can provide the machinery through which new initiatives for public well-being can be undertaken. For example, a group of farmers together can raise the capital and get access to the technical know-how which is necessary to control a stream and put it to service. Or the residents in an area can together build a road or a bridge, knowing that it will be for mutual benefit. They will not fear that it might just benefit the individuals who happen to have a lorry and who may not reduce his charges, although his vehicles no longer suffers damage from fording a stream, and so on. So he's like, if somebody builds a road, so so even in capitalism, so even in wealth of nations and all that, right? There are public expenses, and public expenses are like infrastructure, infrastructure. You're not asking individuals or private individuals to build roads because that's obviously not it would have its own impact. But this is not too unusual. Although it's unusual for the farmers to build a road, but it's not unusual for community ownership of roads. Although the facts of modern technology, or at least service roads, Yet, although the facts of modern technology provide the final justification for the communal ownership of the means of production and exchange, it is not always and everywhere appropriate. The principle. Wait, sorry a second. It says the facts of modern technology provide the final justification for the communal ownership of the means of production and exchange. It is not always and everywhere appropriate. The principle of social ownership and control does not provide a detailed answer to every problem. There you go. It is possible, as we have found out in Tanzania, for farmers to be exploited even by their own cooperative and their own state if the machinery is not correct, or if the managers and workers are inefficient or dishonest. Okay. It is possible for the group ownership to result in a stultification of development and as such stagnation that in the end the producers would get greater benefit from controlled forms of individual exploitation. For it is not good enough just to deprive people of the incentive of selfishness. Development requires that there should be replaced by effective social incentives. While these do not exist, or the extent that they do not exist, we have seriously to consider whether and how far we can dispense with the incentives of private property at that time. So he's like, yeah, private profit at that time. He's like, yeah, you know what? Private profit actually does have its own benefits. Let me see. I think it's only 2 more pages. Or 4. Dang, it's a lot. Okay, I'm going to try to speed up because, I was kind of like reading slowly just because nobody was here, but I'll try to speed up. So the purpose of socialist organization must be the central factor. Let me just see if the comments. No comments. Okay. Whoa, 7 people. Shoot, people like Nyerere. I like that. All right. The purpose of socialist organization must be the central factor. So we get problems of what can be and should be socially owned or controlled at each stage in a society's development. Even of things which are quite basic to a nation's economy, public ownership may not necessarily and always be the correct answer for socialists at a particular time, especially where public ownership means disruption of an existing industry. Alternative methods of public control may be appropriate. This can sometimes be exercised through other means, through legislation, veto, consultation, and so on. A decision should depend on the circumstances and the prevailing attitudes, that is, on the success of socialist political education. We have to accept, however, that anything short of ownership often requires a sophisticated and expensive administrative structure if it is not to be simply negative in its effects. In making all such decisions, the purpose of socialist organization must be the central factor. That purpose is the service of the people. You do not often serve the people by actions which outrage their feelings, even if those actions are intended to give them collective control over a vital element of their livelihood. Take, for example, the question of land. In Tanzania, we abolished freehold ownership of land shortly after independence. All land now belongs to the nation. But that was not an affront to our people. Communal ownership of land is traditional in our country. It was the concept of freehold which has been foreign to them. In tribal tradition, an individual or family secured rights in land for as long as they were using it. It became the family land when it was cleared and planted. For the rest of the time, it was tribal land, and it is reverted to tribal land if the family stopped working it. The only change which our law affected as far as the masses were concerned was that the land became national instead of tribal, and we have been fortunate enough in Tanzania for this transition to be an easy one. Thus, only about 1% of our land was really affected by this law, and no Tanzanian who really wants to farm has been unable to find the necessary land, even if not just where he wants it. Right. So yeah, basically, land ownership of the state is normal. And the tribes were just states. They were just states, but they were tiny. But they were always states. The ethnic groups are nations. They were nations. They were nations. Like prior to colonization, they handled their own law. Like they had their own land. They handled their own laws. They had their own, you know what I mean? Like they were sovereign in their land. What happened was that they were invaded and they were destroyed and their land was stolen from them. But they were sovereign. They had their own laws and all that kind of stuff. So they were already nations. And so Tanzania, just being this bigger nation, kind of absorbed them. Whether that's fair or not, it's kind of like, power is the only thing. Like might makes right. So these circumstances have meant that the land reforms, which were an essential ingredient of the revolution in Egypt, so I don't know which revolution he's talking about, would be inapplicable to Tanzania. Equally, our modified traditional ownership system may be quite irrelevant here, or at least quite inappropriate. But the purpose of our different moves has in both cases been socialistic. Both of our states have acted to secure the use of land for the service of the people and to prevent it providing a basis for inescapable exploitation. Yet for neither of our countries is the present action the end of all action. Having secured or controlled ownership, we have to decide what is done with the land and how it is done. And then we have to implement those decisions. This means down-to-earth village-level decisions which are acceptable to the people there, and at the same time compatible with the larger aims and interests of the society as a whole. And if the correct socialist policy on ownership between two socialist states is different, surely the correct decisions at this lower level will also be different. Indeed, differences may exist at this level even within the one state, according to the experience of the people in the particular place and the geophysical circumstances exist in that locality. So again, I don't mind this local like rewarding people for their local ownership. It's good, but again, when you're talking about an advanced economy, you start getting into the reality that what if there's something on the land that's really meaningful to somebody else who's not on the land? You know what I mean? And that's like really realistically what happened in regard to Africa, is that we had land that was valuable to foreigners. You know what I mean? But like it wasn't necessarily as valuable to us for the same reason. You know what I mean? So like you could live next to a coltan mine and the land is rich, so you would be like a farmer. You know what I mean? And the coltan is nothing. Like it's good for processor chips, but you don't make processor chips. So, it's a superconductor, but you don't really utilize electricity in that sense, like in that same capacity. So, like what happens then? And so a lot of us are like, hey, you're near that land, you should get the profits from that. You should get the profits from the coltan because it's valuable to those foreigners, but it's like not really valuable. You know what I mean? It's not that valuable to you. Or like another example was, I think we saw this on Shoot the Breeze. Hold on a second. I think we saw this on Shoot the Breeze where these white boys were looking for a marijuana strain in the Congo. And so the marijuana strain was really valuable to these white boys. Like these white boys could sell it for big bank in the Netherlands, right? But for the black people there, it was just a crap. You know what I mean? Like it was good for getting high. But it wasn't something that they were going to sell for a big profit in the Netherlands. You know what I mean? Now, some people turn around and say they should have made all the money, but it's like you're not really going to make money if you don't engage in the trade, and that's like the complication in regards to that kind of stuff. Jose tells us that, LOL, we're here. Yeah, we're here. Appreciate it, fam. Appreciate it. Of course, it is not only in relation to land and agriculture that a socialist party will vary between different countries. We in Tanzania have recently engaged in a small nationalization exercise, and in other cases have secured majority control in private enterprises. We are now in the stages where people are debating whether we acted correctly or not. Some people criticize us for outright nationalization, some for not nationalizing all industries and commerce, and still other groups criticize us for using former owners as managers of publicly owned industries and businesses. So that's what I'm saying. Like who should be managing it? If I have a successful restaurant, and the state says, no, fuck you, you're not taking a profit anymore. You're just gonna, the restaurant's gonna continue. No, we're gonna take over your restaurant. Okay, fine, you take over my restaurant. Okay? But now they're like, and now you don't have a fucking job, you idiot. You know what I mean? Like you don't have a job anymore because, you were formerly the owner of that restaurant, and now we're the owner of the restaurant. But then it's like, I'm like, okay, I know how to manage this restaurant. And you're like, nope, get this motherfucker out and put in, Joe Schmo. Or I guess a Tanzania name. I don't know a random Tanzania name. But put in Joe Schmo, That's it. Now you could do that, or you could be like, you know what, this guy was an effective manager before, he'll continue to be a manager. And so he's saying that, people criticize them for nationalizing. People criticize them for not nationalizing everything. People criticize them for keeping the managers as managers because who else would be the good manager? You know what I mean? And so needless to say, there are other groups which applaud those same actions. We welcome such discussion when it is constructively based on the needs of Tanzania. Out of such discussion, what may have been clear before becomes clear, and rationality continually guides us on our socialist path. So he's really saying, look, the practical, real world. I'm kind of boggled down by his socialism for its unrealism, but he is also outside of the doctrine very realistic. what are our needs? What are our needs? What are our needs? You know, but despite their importance for the future, and despite the attention that our recent public ownership measures have attracted internationally, there are only a small part of the real task Tanzania has now undertaken. In our case, agricultural development, and therefore a socialist agricultural policy, is the central issue and the core of Tanzania's development of self-reliant socialism. See, that's what I'm saying. He's like really focused on agriculture. And this we have hardly begun, but we have land in abundance, and traditional agricultural methods which fail to make full use either of the land itself or of the energies of our people. It appears to me that these facts will inevitably cause differences of emphasis and organization between the socialist policies of Tanzania and those of the United Arab Republic. For here, as I understand it, you have the problems of a rapidly rising population pressing heavily upon arable land resources and agricultural methods already to some extent adapted to the needs of intensive agriculture. These are different problems from ours, and your measures to bring socialism may therefore be different too. And surely, if such different policies are needed between our two parts of African continent, linked as they are by the Nile waters, even greater differences will be correct socialist policy between either of us and nations elsewhere. Socialist policies will vary from place to place. So he's like, look, there's not just one socialism. I mean, technically there's supposed to be, but he's saying, no, I don't agree with that. And that's fine. Because like his goal is to really facilitate a nation, not an imaginary situation. Like I said, Marxism is science fiction. It's science fiction. And I don't know if I can stress that enough. I stress it on Shoot the Breeze. Let's see. EL made a comment, so I'm going to read that. EL says, the fact that our coltan is not valuable to us is what traps us. How can we get out of poverty if the government doesn't educate children enough to master the science related to coltan and the value addition to coltan? When we export raw material, we export jobs. Exporting raw materials and buying the finished project with value added is an impoverishing mechanism. Definitely. The only issue I'll tell you is this, that coltan was not known to be useful until like I want to say like the 1980s, maybe. You know what I mean? Like it's realistically like you can't expect everybody to figure out, like you can't expect a bunch of farmers, right? Because they were probably farmers in that area to know that mineral that looks like dirt, that mineral was incredibly valuable. You know what I mean? Even if you say you can't like educate children enough, like nobody possessed knowledge of microchips until like the 1980s or something. You know what I mean? Like it's very unrealistic. Like, and that was like in America maybe or something, or like maybe like somewhere in Europe or something. Like it's very like it's for us. It's kind of unrealistic that that people in that region, that like everybody, like even if you were to supply a good education, because again, like technically people in the 1950s had a good education, like Europeans in 1950 or Japanese in 1950s, none of them had any knowledge about the uses of coltan for microchips. Maybe they probably knew it was a highly conductive metal, you know what I mean? But to say that they would know its commerce value, its commercial value, just off of like an education, it's not a thing. You know what I mean? Like there's this other video I saw of this liquid. Okay, there's this liquid that when you apply pressure to it, then it condenses into a solid, right? It has no commercial value. Some people do think you could probably make liquid armor out of it, like contribute to bulletproof vests, but it doesn't. So it really has no commercial value. Now, if you have whatever is the ingredients in abundance, right? You just have these ingredients in abundance. They have no commercial value, So for me, it's like I can't really blame people for that. What I would say is that now, in retrospect, when you know that this mineral is worth a lot, you should pivot your economy towards using that mineral. But like that's again one of the issues with the quote unquote socialist paradigm, is that you probably will not innovate computer chips. You know what I mean? You probably will not innovate computer chips. And when you do not innovate computer chips, like your government, which will control all the industry, according to Trigger Happy, right? Your government, which controls all the industry, will not make use of the materials on hand. Like it probably wouldn't even sell it, but it probably wouldn't make use of the materials either. you know. But that still wouldn't stop Wazungu from having an interest in your land. You know what I'm saying? And so what he would do is he's constantly building better weapons. He will probably find a way to attack your society, and you not really constantly building weapons, will probably not be able to defend yourself, and you just run back into the same problem. Trigger Happy says, to me, the value of resources really comes down to a worldview thing. So you can't castigate African people for not knowing the value of these things when Europeans basically worship money and profit. Well, not just that. It's just unrealistic. It's just, how do you know the value of something? It's like with the Congolese marijuana. The marijuana is not actually worth any more than marijuana in the West. It's the only reason why it's even worth something is because it's not in the West. You get what I'm saying? Like, the only reason why it would be worth, like, it's not worth anything. It's like a mango is, like I said, like when it comes to mango, or like avocado is a good, no, I'll use the mango example because I know mango, right? Mango falls from a tree. My aunt's house, like, a lot of the mango that we got was mango that was on the floor, just on the floor to rot. Cause the lady who lived there, like, wasn't even home. So the mango was like not worth anything. The coltan's not really worth anything. The reason why there's value to the mango is if you're not able to get it easily. You get what I'm saying? If you're not able to get it easily. So if you're suddenly in Antarctica or whatever, then the mango is actually worth a whole bunch because you're not in a tropical environment, one. And two, you know, like, you want something, you want a mango, right? The thing with the marijuana was that it wasn't worth anything. Why it was worth something was that people in the Netherlands were like, oh, cool, a different strain of marijuana. I want to try that. But it's not really worth more than the marijuana that they have. It's just, you know, yeah, I guess Trigger Happy says economy is just supply and demand, you know? Supply and demand. If there's a demand somewhere and the supply is low, then it's going to go up in value. But it's not really worth anything, you know? So, like, you could even, like you say, like, you could be in the Congo and you can make computer chips. And if white boy doesn't want to use your computer chips, then your computer chips are not worth anything. And you just use a bunch of coltan for your computer chips. You get what I'm saying? Like, that's it. So you like realistically, the economy route, like the economy paradigm, and I hope I could expand on it in my next book. But the economy route is like, it's really complicated. It's not like, oh, well, you know, shit, we could have, like, because like, if they don't buy your computer chips, then who cares? Like, if they don't buy your phones, then you just built a bunch of phones. You know, like you saw all that bread. If nobody eats bread anymore, right, which is unlikely, but if nobody eats bread anymore, then like, you just made a bunch of bread. So let me see something. Trigger Happy says, to me, the value of resources really comes down to, there is another paper I want to read on the North Korea in regards to them secretly being open to market economy, looking at a lot of Marxist-Leninist states now. A lot are opening up to market economy to innovate, kind of like China with Deng. Even the first North Korean leader encouraged business owners in order to innovate because they had a backward economy. Yeah, I mean, look, I think what North Korea is doing and China is doing, I think they're doing pretty well. I don't think that, like, hating on the Western economy just off of principle, like, makes is like that, like, is that deep. You know, you want to, it's like, if you want to break down a fence, because, like, when you read, like, when I'm reading Adam Smith, I'm like, yeah, I see where he's wrong. You know what I mean? But I also see some value in what he says. So, like, you just have to have that discernment. The same way how I'm reading Nyerere and I'm like, yeah, I see where he's wrong, but I also see a lot of value here. You know, like, Nyerere is clearly looking after the needs of his people. He clearly values African people. You know? I mean, obviously, he's talking the globalist, non-racialist thing, so I don't like that. But, like, clearly, it's like, you know, I think it's like chew the meat and spit out the bones, you know? But how do you know what's the meat and what's the bones? Like, that's why I'm here. You know what I'm saying? All right, EL says, we need to prioritize research and development. Some countries don't have the actual resources and they can teach us about stuff in our backyard. Example, Taiwan or South Korea. Yeah. Research and development creates a future for us. Yeah, definitely. You know, I'm hoping that my next book can inspire um, African people, especially those in positions of authority and responsibility. You know, as Nyerere started off, this address is for the people in responsibility, you know, in positions or who may be in positions of authority and responsibility. Like, I hope I can reach them, but if I can't, you know, I can't. I'm going to do my good college effort. You know, it'll be ultimately. So it may be that ultimately we when we have created socialist states, instead of being engaged in building them, the institutions and organizations in all socialist countries will be very similar. I do not know. The evidence does not yet exist, but I'm convinced that the path to the point where our respective peoples control their own livelihood and their own development will certainly be, sorry, I was just checking my phone, will certainly be different. Man coming to Cairo from Dar es Salaam goes in the opposite direction from that taken to a man coming from Cairo from Moscow. What matters is that each goes in the correct direction from his particular departure point. It is not possible for a country which moves to socialism from a highly developed capitalist economy to follow the same path as one who starts from a backward peasant economy. So he's like, we have a backward peasant economy. Nor is it likely that two backward countries moving to socialism will follow exactly the same path if one starts from a feudal base, another from a traditional communalism. Each state must move in a direction which is appropriate to its starting point. So he's also, again, like, that's the difference between Maoism and Stalinism, I guess, right? And I actually, look, I don't like white folk, but I'll say that I could respect a strong leader. You know what I mean? Or a leader that cares for their people and has that kind of strength. You know, and I'll give it to that. I could give them their due. You know, and I could also respect an intellectual. You know what I mean? Regardless of race. I'm critical. You know what I mean? Like, even when I'm reading these African intellectuals, I'm reading our African intellectuals, I'm critical. But I can respect I can respect an intellectual, you know? I can respect thought for what it is. Although, however, each country with a socialist purpose has a different path to tread, we can still learn a great deal from each other. Indeed, I believe that we can even learn from other countries which are not avowedly socialist, but which are tackling similar problems of development. The transformation of our people's lives with deliberate government policy is a new development in the history of man. We have very little positive experience to guide us. We must grope our way forward. Undoubtedly, we shall make some mistakes in our enthusiasm or in our caution. Sometimes we shall try things before we are ready. Sometimes we shall fail to choose the best methods out of alternatives available to us. And sometimes we may miss opportunities for advance because we are too cautious. You know, and this is like, he's just a brilliant man. Like, this is like a great personality. This is a great personality. I don't like that he's Christian. I don't like that he's socialist, but this is a great personality. Like, this is a masterclass in personality. This is somebody who recognizes that they're fallible. They recognize that they'll make mistake. There's a human cost to it, but they owe up to it. And like, you have to appreciate somebody like this. This is a great man. Okay. Like don't mistake my criticism for anything deeper than that. Tanzan says, morning, Oni, you are early today. Yeah, I actually woke up really ridiculously early. Jose, gotta go, though. Okay, gotta go. We differ. He says that we differ a lot, worldview, so I look forward to being in convos with your presence. Till next time. Thank you, Jose. We should engage a conversation. Mr. Untouchable seems to be more partial to, well, he seems to be on the capitalist end. So maybe I could host a debate between you two, you know? We could do that. All right. So, but while none of us has all the answers, appreciate your time though. And hopefully you can catch the playback when you can. But I appreciate your time, bro. But while none of us has all the answers, we underdeveloped countries in particular can help each other, especially where we have the same socialist objectives. Some of our problems are similar, but we tackle them at different times and in different ways. Why then should each of us act as if there was no experience at all? This would be to display a nationalistic chauvinism which has nothing at all to do with socialism and its belief in the oneness of man. The opportunities for mutual cooperation and for learning from each other are endless. Certainly, we in Tanzania believe that we can benefit from the longer experience in the UAR. We shall not simply adopt things we see here, but it appears very likely that we shall find ideas and experiences which we can adapt to our own circumstances. It may be that despite our later start, Tanzania too has something and can offer to other socialist countries. That is for others to say. Certainly we shall be willing to make our experience available if and when it is wanted. But in any case, we have to learn from what we see here. Let me conclude these remarks by coming back to my starting point. For example, I've been stressing the fact that there is no one single road to socialism. I hope I have also made clear our conviction that there are certain things which are basic to it, and it is these things which are of vital importance to leadership and to the work of the more educated groups of peoples. Socialism cannot be imposed on people. So he says, in 1962, I said that socialism is an attitude of mind. Right, so this is 5 years later. I still believe this to be true. This is an ancestor, man. I just I don't know. You know, so like low key, like ever since my mother passed away, I've been like ridiculously emotional. So like don't mind me if I'm just like, oh my gosh, she's so good. All right, like oh my gosh, I said gosh by the way. All right, I'm like oh my gosh, she's so good. Yeah. All right. So I said that socialism is an attitude of mind. I'm just like emotional. Like I'm like tearing up. I'm like this guy's so good, and I'm like why am I tearing up? All right. I still believe this to be true. It does not mean that institutions and organizations are irrelevant. It means that without the correct attitudes, institutions can be subverted from their true purpose. You know what? I might have teared up because I said the word ancestor, and like I just remember that I have like one living ancestor right now. You know, like just my father. You know what I mean? But like, yeah, you know, it just sucks. Anyway, so you just like it's just like you have your random emotional triggers, you know. So a little TMI. Yeah, like I tell you, some stuff don't prepare you for that. But anyway, it still believes this to be true. It does not mean that institutions and organizations are irrelevant. It means that without the correct attitude, institutions can be subverted from their true purposes. First and foremost, there must be this acceptance of human equality. Then there must be among the leadership a desire and a determination to serve alongside of and in complete identification with the masses. The people must be and must know themselves to be sovereign. Socialism cannot be imposed upon people. They can be guided, they can be led, but ultimately they must be involved. You know, socialism is a cooperative thing. And I like that. You know what I mean? If the people are not involved in public ownership and cannot control the policies followed, the public ownership can lead to fascism, not socialism. And again, like, I'm not like, you know what I mean? If the people are not sovereign, then they can suffer under dreadful tyranny imposed in their name. If the people are not honestly served by those to whom they have entrusted responsibility, then corruption can negate all their efforts and make them abandon their socialist ideas. So again, what I want to say is this. So that also there you go. That's one of the differences that I like. Let's pretend I'm an intellectual, right? That I offer as an intellectual is that my historical basis, my historical grounding is not in Europe, you know? And so what happens is that there's this thing, I think it was Dr. Clark who said, if you start your history from slavery, then everything seems like progress, right? But that could also continue where it's like, if your historical narrative starts with Europe, then like, yes, you're going to put a bunch of defense mechanisms against fascism. You're going to get a bunch of defense mechanisms against tyranny. You're going to get a bunch of defense mechanisms against corruption. However, my thing, and you guys, I told you guys about this book yesterday when we ruled. My thing is to start in Kemet, you know, or start before Kemet. You know, what some people call it the Ma'a Confederation. You know, try to find out what they were doing in Dartikit, which was a Western African parallel to Egypt. You know, find out what they were doing with the Akan. Find out what they're doing with the Luo. Find out what they were doing with the in Great Zanzibar. No, not Great Zanzibar. Great Zimbabwe. Right. Find out what they're doing in Zanzibar. But find out what our people were doing. And like not just the basic, because like the primitive socialism idea is just you trying to fit yourself in the socialist narrative. You know what I mean? In the Marxist timeline, you know, people might not be familiar, but in the Marxist timeline, he talks about primitive communism and all that kind of stuff. That's not a thing that we had. We had Kemet, we had Zanzibar, we had Zimbabwe, we had, you know, and so find out those stuff. And so what I would say about what happened in ancient Egypt, because that's like one of my favorite civilizations notwithstanding, right, is that they had their leadership was educated very deeply. and educated on Ma'at particularly. And the Ma'at is not exploitation, it is reciprocity, right? So understanding that they were about reciprocity, as I feel, is the most critical thing to have for your leadership. But those whom can be entrusted responsibility, like the corruption would not be a thing then. Like they were very anti-corrupt off of the basis of reciprocity, and so like reciprocity is kind of like what we know, like if you're in a relationship with a woman, and and like how it is, like if a woman is like, so like there's this, let's get dirty, we're adults, right? There's this variant to sex, although Bill Clinton would tell you otherwise, but there's a variant to sex called oral sex, right? I guess it's something done in the West. I don't know. It's probably done in traditional Africa. I don't really know. I never really asked. But I would imagine so. But either way, it's sometimes, let's say a woman goes down on a man, right? And in these modern times, you will have a woman say, hey, look, I went down on you. You go down on me, or something similar. That's reciprocity. Now, it could be in something else. It could be, hey, I go down on you, give me money. That's also reciprocity, right? The exploitation is, go down on me and that's it. Like, you get nothing in return. Like, go down on me and go to your room or some shit. You know what I mean? That's the exploitation. Reciprocity would be, it could be anything. It could be, I go down to you and, you go do the laundry. And I'm like, sure, I'll go fucking do laundry. Like, shit. Yeah, I ain't like for that. All right, let me stop. All right. You guys get what I'm saying. But that's reciprocity. So did I get a little dirty, huh? Let's see. Brother Bakari says, Garveyism is the way. Tanzan said chilling, catching up. I'm gonna just write to Tanzan that she missed the joke. She missed the joke. That's the problem with catching up. I get it. I would just go back and watch the beginning, but I get it. Do what you got to do. The political institutions and organizations to which the people's sovereignty is expressed will vary from one state to another and one time to another, just as the economic institutions of socialism vary. The means most appropriate will depend upon many historical and geographical factors, but ultimately socialism is only possible if the people as a whole are involved in the government of their political and economic affairs. Their efforts must be mobilized. Sometimes this will mean going more slowly, sometimes faster than academic considerations alone would determine, but the involvement of the people is vital, for socialism is nothing if it is not of the people, right? This is a technological age and many decisions cannot be taken directly by the masses. There you go. Tremendous responsibilities therefore rest upon those who have had the privilege of higher education. You see what I'm saying? We have been educated out of the resources of the people. Now we have on their behalf to deal with complex administrative and technical matters and to make choices which affect their welfare. We have the responsibility to give advice to the people on issues where the implication may not be clear. All these things we must do to the best of our ability. But we must recognize too that our function is to serve, to guide the masses through the complexities of modern technology, to propose, to explain, and to persuade. For our education does not give us rights over the people. It does not justify arrogance nor attitudes of superiority. So again, he's talking about the Western model, and that's one of the issues. Like realistically, in Africa, like for instance in Kemet, you wouldn't have that. You wouldn't have that kind of arrogance. You understand that you're there to serve. And that's what I'm saying. Like, one thing I picked up about when you study African people is that, like, even when you study one African person, you're studying African people. Like, we are so consistent throughout, to the point where, like, this gentleman, Nyerere, although he's, like, top tier. He's top tier. I could also see another individual writing this. You know what I mean? Like, I can see another individual saying, hey, you know what? Education for service and all that kind of stuff. Like, and not like off of, oh, well, you could also see Wazungu doing that. Because, yeah, sure, you probably could, if you really looked hard, I guess. But, like, yeah. Like, for instance, I don't see this in reading Adam Smith. This is a good person. And that's why at the core of it, a long time ago, I thought, politics, economics, and culture are related, derivative of ethics. And so what Nyerere possesses is the African ethic. And in that he might be kind of low-key connecting the Wazungu economics on top of it, but he is ultimately, like, fundamentally at his core, he's a good African man, and I do want you guys to appreciate him and study him. So I'll just read the last paragraph, and then we can have everybody put your last comments. I'm gonna do the closing call for comments. Let me do that closing call for comments. I'm typing in. Oh shit, what was I doing? Closing call for comments. We'll read the last paragraph. All aboard. And so I'll just read the last comments, continue the discussion, and then we just go home or whatever. The only justification for bureaucracies, for industries, for our universities is the greater well-being of the human beings who constitute the society. And unless we who have power, whether it be political or technical, remain at one with the masses, then we cannot serve them. Our opportunity is unparalleled in man's history. We must meet the challenge with courage and with humility. So appreciate Nyerere for giving us that. What I'm going to do now is obviously what I do every time, which is I'm going to remind you guys that let me remind you I'm a part of a podcasting network. And I'm going to ask Brother Bakari and Tanzan, and of course Forecast, just give a 10-second clip of hey, you're listening to Brother, tune into, Behind the Veil, tune into Brother Bakari, you know what I mean? So that when I do this commercial, I can just play your videos, And I'll put your logo here too.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Pro-Black Perspective on KWAZ Radio.
Okay, so that's pretty much the end. There you guys have it. This is the Book of Power. You could obviously get it yourself. I do put some more Nyerere in it. I have his speeches, but I just preface it. I give commentary beforehand. I don't give commentary throughout, so you guys can read it. Because part of it is also experimenting with. Part of it also wants to encourage people to speak well and all that kind of stuff. Bobby writes here. He says, "Great show, PBP. Greetings all to the chat." He's saying greetings to everybody here and everybody who's not even here. You know what I mean? He said the Forecast. I don't think Forecast said he was here, but yeah, fam, so far, that's pretty much the end of it. I kind of stretched it a little bit, but, it's fine. I appreciate Nyerere very much, and I want you guys to appreciate him too. So, like I said, I have the Book of Power. I'm at my own private property. You know what I mean? Doing my own commerce. But other than that, let me know what you guys think. Also, what do you guys think about the show yesterday? Do you want me to do more reaction, or do you want me to go back to the old format? But it is what it is. Thank you so much for joining me today. Shem Hotep, Anku Ja Seneb Neb, Amen Ma'at Dua Netcher.